And now, for your listening pleasure, here's Polizzi and Rose, covering the week of media, marketing, and digital content news. This Old Marketing. Take it away, boys.
Hello, my friends. This is Robert Rose, and welcome to episode number 320 of This Old Marketing for Thursday, April 21st, 2022. And with me, as always, my good friend, my colleague, and, a guy who definitely isn't a poison pill, Mr. Joe Polizzi.
Have you been following along?
I have been following along, yes. And did you get a call from Elon? I mean, because apparently he's calling everybody to see if he can raise some dough. But
so
I wondered if you might have gotten a call.
It's so strange because I even saw the article there where, he doesn't own a house. So he's still crashing at friends' places. What an odd bird.
But,
this
it's
genius
just,
is.
Yeah. He's like that roommate that you had in college that never grew up, right? I mean, it's, he still comes over, hangs out at your house, smokes your weed, and then leaves. And then is back again the next month to do exactly the same thing.
Did you happen to listen to the Prof G podcast today, the new one? Did you?
I have not.
Get to
I
it
have
yet?
not listened to it.
It doesn't matter, but it's just so funny. I only listened to the first part of it where I guess Elon had another spat with Prof G, said basically to Prof G, you don't get anything right. And Prof G comes back this morning and something about, Elon, I can feel the sexual tension between you and I. There's something there.
Right.
I'm just like,
that's nice.
There you go, Scott.
Yeah.
Dude, Scott's really loving this because for some reason they go to, Kara and his podcast Pivot as well as Prof G podcast for the commentary on the Elon decision or the whatever Elon is doing with, which I'm now feeling the powers that be are just not going to allow this to happen, even though it probably should. Because
did you hear
have the money? I don't know.
Did you hear the debate between Prof G and the guy who runs Puck?
No, I didn't.
Who is also a former Morgan Stanley financial guy, and basically they disagree, right? So the guy from Puck puts it in an even 50-50 sort of chance. Basically, he said if Elon can come up with the money, and that's a big if, he said it's done. He said there's no way that the board could turn it down. Galloway's like, well, I don't think that's true. I think you could see the price is at 54.20 is really right around the 52-week average, not the 52-week high, and so there's lots of going back and forth. I have in the last week. I was listening to our show last week, and I heard myself say I gave it a 40% chance, and I think I'm still right around there, but I'll be a little bit of the over instead of the under, and I think
you're talking about that Elon buys it.
Correct. That he can come up with the money, basically.
I think he'll come up with the money. Yeah, but I really see. I think it's going to be sold. But I think that somebody else is going to leapfrog and do it. I don't think it's.
So you think you buy the White Knight? You're in the White Knight camp, right? Where there's a unicorn that comes riding in to save the day, and basically, a Google or somebody like that who comes in and says, "We'll take it over."
Absolutely, I would love to see. I would love to see a strategic buyer come in, because I honestly don't know what value Elon's going to make. I mean, because really all that Elon seems to be talking about, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you've been following it, but he's talking about, we want First Amendment rights, we want free speech. What? You want free speech on a private social media company?
Well, he's articulated no strategy. I mean, he's articulated zero strategy for this thing. So there is nothing he's offered that would even resemble a going forward strategy. And this is where I think Galloway made a great point, where he said, let's play this out. Elon wins, comes up with the money, buys it, takes it private. he said, I think it probably might be the biggest brain drain of any company ever. He said, because think about all those employees at Twitter that have been working so hard to try and build something and have been doing so on the promise of, some very big reward day that now all of a sudden gets pushed out because you take the company private. They're leaving. They're just not going to stick around. And those are the people that actually have to make stuff work.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it would be different if Elon came in with some type of vision for what the company should be. And I just haven't, nobody seems to have that. I mean, the only thing that, as we're touting Galloway's podcast more than this podcast, but the only thing that Galloway has really talked about is I don't know how many followers Scott Galloway has, 500,000, whatever he's got, or 1 million. He said he would pay a lot of money to keep those followers.
Of course.
So that's where he was saying, we talked about that subscription program. He's basically saying Twitter needs to stop fooling around with this $2.99 a month Twitter Blue or whatever else they're doing. And the thing with the NFT, forget all that stuff and really go after your influencers that really want to keep their influence will pay a monthly or annual subscription to keep that.
I'd pay. Would you pay?
I would absolutely pay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even think twice about it. So here they are fiddling around with things. We'll talk about some of the stuff in the Netflix strategy coming up here. That's our first article. But sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, right? They have a audience, a vibrant, well-paid audience right in front of them that are willing to give Twitter money that they're neglecting.
Exactly.
I don't understand why you just don't try. You don't even have to come out and say, here's the big thing like they normally do. Saying we're testing this out.
Anybody over, let's say, because I want to be part of it. So anybody over 50,000 followers can sign up for a subscriber only where, and by the way, you sign up for a subscriber only, maybe the ads don't go away right away. Because that might be technically hard, but so you basically are signing up, and for that you get some subscriber management tools, you get some analytics, you get some ability to see who your people are, and the ability to get rid of bots, and all those things to clean up your following, and you're guaranteed some level of reach. Do those things, and I would sign up in a heartbeat.
Well, you know what? You don't even have to go that far, Robert. You could just, whatever the equivalent of the blue check mark is, those people that pay, those people basically that pay and get that.
Right. And to include that would be, what you would do is put in identity management, right? So in other words,
yes, exactly.
Basically democratize identity management, where in order to get because right now it is a stupidly hard thing to get a blue check mark. Which is, you got to show that you have a Wikipedia page, or you got to show that you're somehow some super famous celebrity. But really, the idea is that what you're saying with a blue check mark is that I'm me. I am this person.
Exactly.
And so you put in the same kind of identity management that you have to do to open up a Coinbase account, and that gives you your blue check mark. I'd pay for that, plus the subscriber management, plus the idea to see how many bots I have, clean it up, give me a little more design flexibility, and it's done. It's over. I would totally pay a good amount of money every year for that because I enjoy the platform.
Well, see, we would just solve it. If we only had enough money, we could solve this. But they're not listening to us.
That is true.
They're just off. And we talked about this last week. They're all distracted now. It's a big old distraction. That's the thing. And they're not talking strategy. And you're not even hearing much from Twitter's new CEO. It's almost like it doesn't exist.
Well, that's the shame of this whole thing, is because now you've got, I don't know if you also saw this week, you've got Jack Dorsey saying horrible things about the other, not horrible things, but certainly nothing productive about his fellow board members. And by the way, the board members own very little stock in the company. So the board
it's
members
weird,
here,
isn't it? They own. I saw some, and this is maybe the one thing that, if there's any positive thing that Elon Musk has brought to light with Twitter, it's the board setup, because they get paid, I think, something like $300,000 a year for sitting on the board, but they don't have any skin in the game.
Right.
That's right. Which is weird.
They don't use this. They don't use the platform. Yeah, most of them don't use the platform, and it's
strange what's going on. And it's also strange that Jack Dorsey owns literally nothing of Twitter stock.
Yeah, he's like 2%. Yeah, he's 2%.
Like, oh my! As a founder, that's odd. But anyway, so you're saying, to close this out, you're thinking north of 40%. You're almost leaning 50-50 that Elon's going to buy this thing.
It's all about the money, right? It's all about, can he raise the money? And I see great arguments on both sides of that. So there are plenty of ways for him to raise this money with friends and family, and I use that term very loosely. But there are also really challenging liquidity problems that he's got that any sane person is going to go, what am I getting myself into? Because for him, this is a play date, right? This is him, this is literally him bunking on somebody's couch. He's got nothing to lose, really. But for someone who's not a 260 billionaire, this is real money that would be required of them. And so they've got to believe that there's a business strategy here. And so, in other words, it's not just the same of him calling up a few friends and going, hey, chuck in a few bucks and let's go buy this thing and see what happens.
True, but as we're speaking right now, Tesla results came out this morning, and they just blew the doors off of profit and revenue estimates. So the stock itself is now a $1 trillion market cap company again. It's up 6.3%. So that $240 billion.
Which one?
Tesla.
Oh, Tesla. Oh,
Tesla. So he has even more money. So that $240 billion is probably more like $300 billion now.
Oh my God.
And so I don't think getting the money is going to be a problem. I really do think that somebody's going to leapfrog. I would. It's
going to happen soon. I think it's going to happen soon. Yeah, it's going to happen soon, I think.
That's why you're seeing the lack of vocal leadership coming from Twitter right now. Because there's conversations.
There's
happening.
Something working. Yeah. You're probably right.
Yes, there's lots of conversation. As soon as Elon went out with that, I bet you had 4 CEOs of other companies contact Twitter and say, "Hey, if you're on the block, let's do this."
Right.
So they're dancing. They're dancing with somebody else right now, and Elon's going to be left out of the party. That's my take.
That may be true.
They're not taking a Tesla to the wedding.
Well, yeah, exactly. And they're not going to be eating at Olive Garden. That is the other.
Oh my God, this Olive Garden thing is taken off. Like
I know.
You and I going to an Olive Garden
is in the cards for sure.
Yes, it absolutely is going to happen. So,
all right, let's get to the rest of our show because we have other things to talk about other than our friend Elon. Although, interesting, Elon has sort of taken the place of the NFL. So, and we haven't really even talked about the USFL, which of course has launched in the spring. Have you watched any of that?
I saw that it was on. I saw that every game takes place in Birmingham, Alabama.
That seems seemingly, yeah. It's a very
it's nice. It's nice. It's fine. I don't know if the United States has room for another football league, but
it's just being marketed in the most awful, horrible, non-existent way. I just, if I'm not hearing about it, there's something wrong with your marketing. Like I am literally, to borrow the Valley Girls parlance, I am literally your target market. And if I'm not hearing about it, you are missing big. So yeah, I can't understand.
Here's what they should have done. And by the way, not that I believe in this strategy because part of me thinks it's wrong, but they should have totally gone out with DraftKings and MGM and Caesars and the whole thing. Everything sponsored by the online gambling apps, and you just have all kinds of betting happen. It's like, we're going to bet on everything with this thing.
They could have, see, here's the thing, they could do both. They could have done both. They could have gone exactly like you're talking about, which is sort of the new brand of mic'd up everybody, bet on every play, all those kinds of things, hyped up thing. They could have totally done that, which would not have reached me. And they could have also done, oh my God, you missed the NFL. Here's spring football. That would be, wonderful. And here are the players, and here's the storylines, and here's the, because what I want is the storylines, right? I want the storylines of the, there's some great ones. Jeff Fisher is coaching. I mean, look, I'm not going to get off on a rant because all the Europeans will turn the show off and all that, but there are so many great storylines of people who are playing in the USFL who are either ex-NFL or were college stars that didn't quite make it. And there's so many great storylines here that could have been exploited and created to create a bit of a mythology around the USFL and how awesome it could be. And it's just a hashtag huge fail in my mind.
It's just like a content marketing strategy. What
right?
Is the
oh my God.
Well, what's the differentiation? Like, literally, why is it any different than NFL? And if it's not anything different or anything drastically different than what I can see with the NFL, I'm not going to invest additional time in this new league. So that's why, you and I have talked about the Savannah Bananas minor league baseball, where they sell out all their games, because that is a different experience. It is a completely different experience from anything else going on in baseball. So great. We want to fly from all over the country and go to Savannah, Georgia to see a minor league baseball team play. Let's go to USFL. What is different? Yeah, there's some great side stories. Used to be in NFL, got off the streets, was working in the drugstore yesterday, now is place kicking, whatever the case is. All that stuff is there. But that's nothing different than you can already get, for the most part, in the NFL.
That's a fair point, but I would say combined, the sort of the combination of that plus access to the game and the technology and all the things that you mentioned with regards to the betting and all those kinds of things would make for a differentiated product. In other words, you have to provide some familiar angle for me from a marketing perspective. You have to provide familiarity with a customer, like that this is for you. Then you can introduce the differentiation of why you should stay. And I've watched a couple of these on YouTube, and I love the fact that they have everybody mic'd up, including the coaches, and you get to hear the coaches, yell at the refs and what they're saying and the discussions they're having and the plays that are getting made. And it's great access to the game. The helmet cam is so cool. So all this technology stuff that they're introducing is really interesting for aficionados of the sport. But then, anyway, we should move along.
I don't see it's just, to me, not enough. Not, if you're going to go through all this trouble, let's just think of a little bit more. Maybe it's football for non-football fans.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I may be asking for a faster horse, right? You know what I mean? It's like that there's ebbs. I fully cop to the fact that I may be too close to it, that I may be asking for a faster horse instead of a motor car, but so
that's what I probably would have done, because if you look at XFL and you look at all the things that have done, it was all a faster horse. Let's just tweak it a little bit different. I think you need to reimagine it and say, here's something truly different.
You may be right. Yeah.
So, or how about like European football? Like there, there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Whatever. All right, what do we got?
All right.
What do we got?
Well, we're getting late here. It's a late start. Well, we actually are. The show really started when we started talking about Elon, but the other stories that we'll cover here very quickly. Yes, of course, we have to talk about Netflix, and because there's a real chance that the Netflix losing subscribers in their quarterly earnings report represents a sea change in streaming media. So we'll talk about that, because there are some implications there, certainly for marketing as well and content. We'll talk a little bit about how a couple of different ideas here around content creators. Certainly, Rolling Stone is now turning to creators as the new rock stars. Fascinating story there. Game development companies are also supporting content creators, and this is really starting to provide for new opportunities for entrepreneurs. We'll talk about new forms of advertising, raising ethics questions, and then we'll get to our rants and raves, where Joe's going to talk a little bit about how influencers are actually becoming entrepreneurs and how that represents a new vision for marketers. And I'm going to talk about web scraping, a new judicial ruling has come down on web scraping and content, and my take on that. So a good full show, I think.
Show. A well-run machine you have created with this episode. I am very excited about these.
Cornucopia.
Let's
a cornucopia
do this.
Of media idea. All right, we're going to start with our first one. Yes. And it arrives to us courtesy of a couple of links that we'll put in the show notes, both of which come from Axios, which really speaks to what's going on with Netflix and their announcement and the stock just completely tanking, as well as maybe a sea change indication for streaming media. Of course, if you missed this, and it was covered just about everywhere, Netflix on Thursday said it's weighing offers for a cheaper ad-supported subscription plan over the next year or two because Netflix stock fell more than 20% in after-hours trading after the streaming giant said it lost 200,000 subscribers in the first quarter. Its first subscriber loss in a decade. On a video call with investors, Netflix chair and co-founder Reed Hastings said the streaming giant is looking at lower-priced ad-supported plans, noting that it makes a lot of sense for consumers to have that option. Yeah, he would say that. After losing 200,000 subscribers, that starts to look a little more appealing to you. The other story that we will sort of link to this, and we can just talk about all of it, is another Axios story, and also being covered in a number of other publications as well, is does this Netflix change in global streaming subscribers indicate a real sea change in the way that streaming media is happening? So we can see that Netflix's stock sank more than 20% after the streaming giant said it lost 200,000 subscribers. But this is also starting to see other elements of maybe canaries in the coal mine of other things. CNN, by the way, had more news this week that we talked about last week, CNN minus. Now it looks completely doomed as the the chief financial officer has been let go, and others look like they're going to get let go as well as Warner takes over. Netflix looking at ads and them blaming password sharing, all of those kinds of things. So, taking all this into account, Mr. Polizzi, Mr. Media Man, what do you think?
Yeah, it's so interesting. First of all, streaming, especially for Netflix, is now a mature business. There's no more low-hanging fruit for the subscriber growth that they had. You don't have the start from 13, 14, 15 as more people were getting onto streaming, getting devices where they could watch streaming media, and then you don't have the pandemic anymore where everybody was at home. Now you've got regular living, and you have competition coming from everywhere. And we talked about what happened with CNN. You don't have a differentiated product. Netflix is a great product. I think what they invest into it is amazing, but you have a lot of other options now. HBO Max is a worthy competitor, in my opinion. Apple, even though I don't think that they have enough programming on there, they have some really good shows on there as well. You've got Paramount Plus. You've got Hulu. How many things do you want? So I think what you're going to see in the next, 6, 9, 12, 15 months, consolidation is on the way. So that's the one thing I think that's going to happen, where you're going to have some of these streaming companies eat up each other. I don't know. What I don't know is going to happen, Robert, is you have so much spending. One of these articles said that next year Netflix was planning on, Disney has said it plans to spend $33 billion on content this year compared to $14 billion Netflix spent last year. So whatever, Netflix is going to spend 20, Disney next year is going to spend 40. People, the audiences out there do not have enough attention time to give to all these streaming services. Like, we're not going to add 26 hours to the day, right? Or 28 hours in a day now, where I can now consume content for another 4 hours. It's not going to happen. It's just not there. We only have 2 eyeballs. So I don't know what's going to happen with this whole trend. I think it's going to continue. My thing on the ad support, okay, the ad supported thing I get. I sort of. But if what this says is true, that they're so Reed Hastings, the CEO, comes out and says their subscriber loss was because of so much password sharing. And they said they're trying to fix that password sharing. If you just simply say, share passwords with all you want, it's going to be whatever, $5 a month for sharing or whatever it is. They will get their bump back up again. And count that as a new subscriber, add it to the main account, share all these passwords, done and done. They said 100 million people are using passwords without paying for it right now. 100 million.
Yes. And by the way, they're getting roasted a little bit for a tweet that came out a few years ago where they were encouraging people to share passwords. So, look,
yeah, it's fine when you're growing
right.
subscribers at 30% a quarter.
That's right. And by the way, when you lose 200,000 subscribers, it's not password sharing. You don't lose accounts when you password share, right? Growth slows, but you don't lose 200,000 accounts because guess what? Those are 200,000 passwords that are now no longer available to the people who were sharing them with their friends. So,
and by the way, you got to remember Netflix, even though you might think that $15, $16 a month is valuable, it is the most expensive service.
It is.
Out there.
It is. But the thing is, like, you're sort of belying your own argument there, right? If you say, look, everybody's sharing their passwords with at least 3 other people, and that's a real problem. And then you go, oh, well, you said you lost 200,000 accounts. Does that mean you actually lost 600,000 subscribers? So that the whole password thing is a distraction.
But I guess here before you go on, I want to get your take. But we just talked about this with the football thing. If you have 100 million people that are watching Netflix and not paying for it, but you're saying the solution might be a cheaper ad-supported subscription plan, what?
Right?
What? That makes no sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense.
You're saying this is the problem, then why is a cheaper ad-supported subscription plan the solution? It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so so that was what I was going to get to is like, okay, now you move that into the ad-supported space, and I'm coming around on that. I mean, when we talked about on this show when Disney announced its ad-supported model, we talked about that doesn't make a lot of sense because it's taking the premium out of the premium product. I'm coming around a little bit of that now after hearing a few analysts talk about this and perhaps how it might. The challenge is, you said it well, right, with the how much time versus content there is. This was coming. We could see this coming from 10 miles away. You just can't pour $140 billion into new content and expect to keep that up forever. It just doesn't work. There aren't enough credit cards in the world to support as many streaming services as we have. We learned this, by the way, also 30 years ago during the cable wars in the 1990s, where so many cable networks emerged during the late 80s and early 90s trying to take advantage of, the ability for adding incremental subscriptions to your cable. And what happened? We started seeing bundling. And you started seeing more and more bundling and aggregation, and basically went from 100 different networks to ostensibly 4 or 5 different packages that you could purchase all under one company. That's coming. There's no doubt that we are going to see aggregation here in terms of the number of streaming services that are available and the amount of content that you get for your $5 or $10. So to me, sure, consider the ad supported model if you may, and that's a Band-Aid, I think, in general. And yeah, I now kind of buy it as a business model. It's like, okay, I could see that, because there was a lot of people who were saying, well, there are people who really want Netflix but can't either literally can't afford it or think they can't afford the $20 a month, and I totally buy that. which is, okay, you want to make a cheaper version of that available to someone, to the vast majority of people who can't or don't want to spend the $20 a month. However, that is a Band-Aid because you run out of ceiling there too, right? You ultimately will run into a very hard ceiling very quickly in that market, because you're basically addressing, of your total addressable market, you're addressing a very small segment that wants Netflix but can't afford the $20. And so you're going to offer an ad-supported version for that. And by the way, you're going to have a number of your $20 a month move to that ad-supported model because they'll tolerate it. So you're going to, on balance, it's just a Band-Aid. What has to happen is that the product has to get better. And the only way the product gets better is if you add better, more, and more diverse content, and you sort of take over the landscape. And you have to, in other words, the people that are going to win are going to steal market share from the other. It's just there's too much product in the market right now, and it has to be reduced.
But I think we are at the point. I mean, when was it? Years ago. Where I guess people are now willing to pay for all this content. We're coming to a point where people have a limit. CNN
Sure.
is a really good example. Whether it's streaming services, whether it's pay for whatever. I mean, I can tell you firsthand with content creators and all the education that's out there from everybody with content creators, you've got a lot of people charging for content. And it's not going to work when everyone's saying, "Oh, buy this, here's this plan, this training, this." It's just not going to work. There's a limit. So that's where I'm not a big fan of the advertising-based model, but there are a lot of ad dollars out there. So when when everyone's zigging, go ahead and zag.
Yeah, my question is, why does it have to be, so the interesting thing to me is, why can't we explore other models? Why does it have to be the classic, this gets to our conversation we were just having with Twitter, right? Why does it have to be one way that we're so used to seeing? Why can't we invent another sponsorship model that doesn't include 30-second interruptive-based ads? Isn't there a way that Netflix could invent a new way for corporate sponsorship of content? And, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's literally, this episode of Stranger Things is brought to you by Toyota, and they feature Toyota trucks in the whole thing. I don't,
Yeah.
Basically,
sponsored
a better way to integrate.
Placements. Yes.
Exactly. A better way to have sponsorship within the content itself, other than a 30-second interruptive-based ad in the middle of a 21-minute episode.
I don't know what we were. I was out at we were out at a bar or something like that. We were watching ESPN, and ESPN was running that ticker below like they always do. But there was a commercial. The commercials just were all the time. It was bothering me. And I'm like, just replace the stupid ticker, like with most stations. Just replace that stupid ticker with, here's your sponsor, right there at the bottom.
Yeah.
This half hour is sponsored by Toyota trucks. Have a little truck picture in the bottom. Run it through the whole thing. People don't care about that if they can see the content. If I would absolutely take that if I don't have to waste 2 minutes every 15 minutes looking at ads.
What's that? It's that great line from Ready Player One. We can have 157 something before
we could get to, I think it's something like 90% ads in front of their face before they go into a seizure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whatever it is.
It's that.
So there you go.
Yeah, right. I'm just hoping for another model. All right, let's move along there, because this is a story that we'll definitely follow, because the news breaking this morning was that one of the billionaire investors has now completely closed his position in Netflix. So this may be a bigger change on the marketplace than otherwise thought of. All right. Next story here comes to us again, courtesy of Axios here, and it's from Rolling Stone. This fascinated me. I did not know that they were doing this, and this was a really interesting evolution here. The article says Rolling Stone is going to debut its inaugural Creators issue on Tuesday, featuring the first in-depth profile of YouTube star MrBeast, who of course we've talked about on this show before, a social media celebrity that has never before graced the magazine's iconic cover. Why it matters, the Axios says, is the company is now fully owned by Penske Media, had its most profitable year in 2 decades in 2021, according to CEO Gus Wenner. Much of that turnaround is tied to a renewed investment in live events, which will be a central part of the company's new editorial focus on creators. In an interview, Wenner called the inaugural Creators issue a crescendo moment for the company, which plans to invest heavily in covering creators as part of a new youth culture moving forward. In May, the outlet will host a live in-person event in LA, sponsored by Meta, that will bring together hundreds of creators. And then Wenner said Meta will often open up a pipeline of online creators with whom Rolling Stone can start to build relationships. The new issue will also feature an exclusive interview with TikTok star Bella Porch, as well as a deep dive into Black creators. And the article goes on to explain how Rolling Stone has been making a number of moves in this space, acquiring a majority stake in Las Vegas's Life is Beautiful music festival, a 50% stake in South by Southwest, and launched a live streaming partnership with Amazon-owned Twitch, and now produces 5 shows a week for the app. I mean, I don't know how this has gone without our attention, but these are huge, wonderful moves, I think, that Rolling Stone has made to become truly a relevant cultural icon again. What do you think?
It's funny. We went on a cruise couple months ago, and they had the Rolling Stone pub. So they were licensing it out or whatever for everything around live experiences, which I think is brilliant. I mean, you know how I feel about this. I think 23, 24, 25 are going to be boom times for the live experiences, especially as more people are going to meet online in social media. They actually want to meet in real life. I think it's going to be a thing. So get ready for that. And they're obviously ahead of the game. And the other thing I was thinking about, why this whole creators thing seems to make sense for Rolling Stone. I mean, when Rolling Stone was launched, what did all the kids want to be? They want to be rock stars.
That's right.
What do they want to
love about
What do they want to be today? They want to be creators.
Yes.
They want to be on YouTube. They want to be TikTok stars. So it is a natural progression for what does our youth in America want to be? I think it makes perfect sense. But from a business model standpoint, I totally get the live events. And by the way, we talk about people paying for things. If you look at, just look at the comedy shows coming to your area. Look at some of the live sporting events. Look at those tickets are going for more money, and they're going. Like, people are paying for live experiences again, and it's just started. And they will pay a premium for really valuable live experiences. And Rolling Stone is really well placed. Obviously, had a great year in 21 with only, maybe a quarter of the events that they were going to launch. When they start launching a full-fledged of events in 23, 24, it's what a great business model this is.
Oh, I just love it as a strategy. I just think it's so important to look at this as a this iconic brand completely reinventing itself around it. You said it so well, right? Which is the what do kids want to be? And when I was a kid, I subscribed to Rolling Stone, and the thing that I wanted to be, I wanted to be Mick Jagger. I wanted to be Elton John. I wanted to be all the people that were, Bob Dylan, the people that were on the cover of Rolling Stone. That was sort of, you would cut out the picture of the Rolling Stone and you would hang it up on your wall. You know what I mean? It's like that, and it's such a great transformation into this creator culture. Now, the interesting thing to me will be to pair this idea, because I think there is an interesting corollary here with what we were just talking about, with the glut of content, the glut of product in the marketplace, and the democratization of the creator movement here, and how those two things crash into each other at some point. it will be really interesting to see, because this could be, what we are seeing in Netflix and the streaming media could be let's call it a leading, maybe even bleeding edge indicator of what we may see in the creator market, which is a bit of a bit of a glut as well. And so first mover advantage is going to be a big one here, right? And so I think it is for those that are anticipating this kind of move, like what Rolling Stone is doing, the fact that they're moving this quickly into things like South by Southwest and Vegas and all those things, and sort of really diversifying their portfolio of events here, I think is a really smart move, because it could be that in a couple of years here we're having the same conversation about content creators as we are about streaming media, that there has to be a consolidation in the marketplace.
You got to remember. Well, actually, I don't know. Did you read the actual article from Rolling Stone on MrBeast? Did you have to read it? Okay, I'll put it in the show notes. It's a long article, really valuable. But you got to remember, he's been creating content. Jimmy Donaldson, MrBeast, has been creating content since he was 11 years old. He's been trying to figure out the YouTube thing for over a decade, and fits and starts and thousands and thousands of videos. And here we are, Jimmy Donaldson, who made revenue. We don't know what he made. Revenue of $54 million last year. That is the 1% of the 1%ers. This is very, very rare. Most content creators who aspire to be content entrepreneurs are not making a good living. There's still what they would call a side hustle. That's why you have a lot of people getting in the game to try to say, hey, the YouTubes, right? The Metas, we will help you. We will help drive revenue for you, because creator is one thing, and there's a whole set of experiences there that you need to know about and operations that you need to know about. But being an entrepreneur is a whole different thing. You need to know how to run a business. So Jimmy Donaldson's figured it out with MrBeast. Fantastic. Most creators don't do that. So you're seeing everyone run at this thing, because literally almost everyone, as you point about democratization, can be a content creator. But it's very hard to take the next step into content entrepreneurship.
And do we see? One of the questions that I ponder in this is: do we see a future where the transcendent, big, iconic celebrity doesn't exist any longer? And what I mean by that is, in a world where you can create 1,000 fans and make a great living, just exactly to your point, right? Where, yes, there are the very special 1%ers who make big bucks, and the rest, there's a very long tail of viable businesses that can create content and become, create shows and create entertainment that can be used and reused. We're already starting to see this a little bit in the way that, I was following some of the Netflix adventures this week, and I see a lot of things saying there's a whole Netflix shows have a feel to them. There was somebody who was writing this article, I thought it was fascinating, about how Netflix movies sort of have a, almost like, how you can pick out a Hallmark movie, a Hallmark Channel movie. It's like they just have a look and feel to them that you're like, that's a Hallmark movie. Netflix movies are starting to develop a bit of a style, right? Where it's low budget, the sort of B, C level celebrities.
Hour 36 minutes long.
Right, exactly. That, that sort of idea, you can sort of just identify it now, and it's starting to become a thing where, that sort of democratization, and we've seen it in Hollywood, where big A and A-list celebrities are now doing television, quote unquote, where they would have never done television before. Once you got, the thing in the 90s and the 80s and 90s is if you made it to the movies as a celebrity, you were never going to do TV again because it was bad for your brand. But now that's where the work is. That's where the money is. And so I just wonder if that sort of spreading out ultimately results in us not caring that much about these iconic celebrities anymore. And instead we sort of see fashion celebrity brands sort of come and go much more quickly. Anyway, it's a bigger topic than...
Yeah, just a side note on that. I mean, I'm just looking at the way that my children engage in media. The celebrities to them are, Minecraft influencers.
Yeah, right.
They wouldn't know, they wouldn't know to look at the Grammys or the Emmys because they don't know any of those people.
Mm-hmm.
They know.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
that's exactly right happening. So it's funny how, the celebrities of the future are going to be very, very per individual.
Yeah.
We'll still have
much
them.
more
They'll
democratized, more democratized, right? And so, if you manage to become a MrBeast, where you've got a huge audience, the question is, does it become much more temporary? In other words, do you become sort of a meteoric rise and then a meteoric fall, or do they just become much fewer of them, right? Much fewer of the big Hollywood type celebrities than we might have seen in sort of the classic heyday of the 50s and 60s and 70s of Hollywood. It's a fascinating topic.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But it is. I do believe in this, 1,000 true fans or 100 true fans thing, where if you have, you have a small loyal audience, you have your super fans. And how many of those can an individual have? I don't know. Depends. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move along here. Do you want to talk about the game development company and the content creators? Or you want to talk about the new forms of advertising?
I want to talk about the new forms of advertising because I really
that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
Yes, let's do this.
Yeah. So this is a story that is coming from what'snewinpublishing.com. And the article, the headline is, publishers say that new forms of advertising are raising questions about integrity. This sort of continuing our theme around ads and media and all of that, and marketing, of course. The article opens up by saying mainstream news media outlets have in recent years begun to create advertisements that look a lot like news articles on their websites and on social media. My research, says the author, raises questions about whether this modern form of advertising might influence those outlets' real journalism. I mean, I don't know if this is shocking or anything, but anyway, These specific advertisements are called native advertising. Ooh, a new term. But are also tagged as sponsored content, partner posts, or other labels consumers don't understand. They look like news articles with headlines, photos, and captions and polished text, but they really are ads created by or on behalf of a paying advertiser. With declining revenue from traditional display advertising and classified ads, news outlets are increasingly relying on native advertising, a sector in which U.S. spending was expected to reach $57 billion by the end of 2021. Fashion, entertainment companies buy native advertising, so do corporations that produce products with potentially significant environmental or health connections. I'm not sure why that's relevant to this article, but you got to get some sort of environmental take in here somewhere. Basically, the article goes on to talk about some examples here from Philip Morris and from others that this author finds objectionable. And basically, the point of the article is that disappearing disclosures and sort of making it confusing for consumers. So isn't this a debate that we've had before, Joe? I mean, not you and I per se, but the world has had about native advertising. What did you think about this? What intrigues you about this?
Yeah, so this article, I swear I've read this in 2013. I swear this exact article has already been published. But I think the issue that I'm seeing here is slowly you're seeing the big media companies get really, really small in their disclosures. They're harder to find than ever before. And almost the same thing, going back to our Elon Musk conversation where he gets in trouble with, people think he should get in trouble with the SEC because of his pronouncements on Twitter, but the SEC has no teeth right now. There's nothing that the SEC can do that we think to Elon Musk that's going to get him scared to do anything else. It's the same thing with this. There's really no, I mean, you could say what you want about the different, FTC requirements and whatever. How can the FTC monitor this when it's not just media companies, it's creators, it's influencers, it's companies. Every organization on the planet is creating company or content around this. and very few of those are doing disclosures. So you're saying, oh, the Wall Street Journal and major media companies have to do a disclosure, but what about everybody else? And I know we've talked about it, and I know it's out there, and I know influencers are very conscious of this, but it can't be policed. It's impossible to police this unless you have an idea. Maybe just with the major media companies, but other than that, I don't think you're going to be able to. It's just out there, and people are going to have to make their own decisions over what content that they think is like quote unquote real content, paid content, fake content. We have to do our own research. The consumer has to do its own research regardless of any labels we put on
it. Indeed. And this is not a new thing, just to be absolutely clear. This has been happening since the days of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Yes. And, where, they would have a readout of a Mutual of Omaha insurance as part of the mid-show, sponsorship. It's been around, sponsored branded content has been around since content has been around. So yes. The idea isn't new here. What is new is the different formats that it takes and the different levels of disclosures that, you would expect to see. Personally, I think I think you're right. I think the real challenge here is, let the market figure this out, and not necessarily make this a governmental thing, because I think you can't really adjudicate this in any sort of templated way. I just think that is just not going to work. Without too much irony here, the What's New in Publishing, the entire right rail is sponsored content, by the way. All of their resources are sponsored content, which are sponsored white papers and, and all those kinds of things. So even within the article itself, you see access to this. But that's a really good point. This.
No, that's a really good point to make, and a lot of people don't realize it. You have entire organizations and creators that are sponsored that never they don't have to put a description because they're just funded that way. It's not like the article is funded. Everything is funded.
That's right.
So they're not disclosing those things either. It's a great point.
Yeah, and that's going to be that's the debate right now in influencer marketing. We won't have time to cover the influencer thing that we were talking about, but it's in many ways very much like a professional athlete or spokespeople were funded by various brands and have been forever, and their appearance on a talk show or their appearance at a public event or a speech was funded by someone else, and they happen to mention that particular product as something that they use, or they actually are wearing the t-shirt, or they're using the product themselves, on Instagram or whatever. All of that is ostensibly native advertising at the end of the day. And so you have to start asking yourself, if Kim Kardashian wears a t-shirt from a jewelry company that she's being sponsored by, does her t-shirt have to have a big label on it that says, sponsored content? Some people might argue yes, some people might argue no. I think ultimately the market has to decide here.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this before. Is what do you do when everything has a bias to it? And it's true. Yeah. Everything does. Some of these are paid biases. Some of these are personal biases. Some of these are corporate biases. But it's there.
Yeah,
so.
and as it goes back to an article that I mean, my take on this. Let me put it that way. I'm not setting myself up to be the arbiter of good here, but my take on it goes back to an article I wrote. I think I wrote this 2011 or 2012, as native advertising was really sort of starting to emerge as a term, and I said basically native advertising should be neither. And in other words, when it's done well, if I write an article for a particular magazine, the definition of native advertising is that the article is written to look like an article. And even in this, what I just read in this particular thing, the article is written to look like an article that would appear in that magazine naturally.
Yeah.
And ultimately, blend in that way and then be, written by a product. It's like, no. If I'm doing this successfully, I'm writing such a valuable, I'm writing something that's better and higher quality and of more interest than something that you would normally see there, because what I want to do is call attention to it. I want to, I want the reader to go, where is this, or why have I never seen something like this in this publication before? Who is this author, and where do I find out more about them? That's what I want as a marketer. And so what I'm trying to do is actually deliver more value than you would actually see in that publication. And I want to steal that audience so that they come over to me and get more value from me.
There's no deception. You're right. There's no deception.
The greatest native advertising ever needs no deception because it's so valuable it calls attention to itself. Hopefully, and I realize I'm a little Pollyanna here. Hopefully that's the marketplace. That's how the marketplace will speak.
Yes, you are Pollyanna because it's not happening. But that's great advice. That's the right advice for anyone listening to this. The problem is that content marketing people generally are not involved in native advertising purchases.
Fair enough.
Media.
Fair point.
So they don't get that. They're like, this is an ad, so let's get some ad copy.
Yep.
That's how they do it.
That's right.
It's too bad. It's so
It takes us all the way back to Howard Gossage, 1950s, ad executive in San Francisco, who said, people don't notice ads. They notice what interests them, and we hope it's an ad. Okay. Let's move to our Rants and Raves section. The Rants and Raves section is, of course, the empirically proven favorite part of the show for all of you out there. And it is where Joe and I go off at a little bit of a rant or a little bit of a rave that makes us feel like we've swallowed a poison pill, or perhaps we're trying to, take a giant bong hit before we buy Twitter. I don't know where I'm going with that. Anyway, you want to go first, or shall I go first?
Yeah, I'm fine. Mine's really brief. There's an article. I don't think I've ever raved about an article in AdWeek before. So first of all, this is a big...
That's a big momentous occasion right there.
This is an absolutely big deal. It's an article in AdWeek. They focus on influencers and creators, and the article is titled "Influencers Are Becoming Entrepreneurs and Marketers Should Take Notes." It's a fine article. It goes through some of different case studies going on. Gives a little clearance or a little love back to Emily Weiss, who started Glossier and all that kind of stuff. But what I like about it is the fact that we're paying more attention now, or hopefully we are paying more attention to the fact that what we mentioned before, these content creators, they're also business owners. This is a very important thing that we need to realize. And because I think in a lot of cases, you've got these content creators, and the article goes into this. Content creators have been doing this for a long time. They do it with limited money. They build up their audience. And there's an opportunity for brands to come in there, partner with them, purchase those sites, do those types of things. And I think that's the thing that a lot of us forget, especially when you're a brand and you think, oh, yeah, in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, I can see some results from my content marketing. And then you realize that the MrBeast of the world did it for 8 years before they had any success. You just don't realize.
Yeah, that's right.
And they had to figure out a business model. And you have to test that model, and then you have to figure out how do you actually run a business and pay for freelancers and do all those things.
If there was only some place where we could learn about all of that. If there was a place where we could learn, like an event or a newsletter we could subscribe to that would teach us.
So I have to say it now because people don't know. We're still getting Creator Economy Expo. That's going to be there in 2 weeks. We're doing that. But yeah, that's why the tilt was born.
That's native advertising. That's great.
It's not native advertising. It's blatant advertising. I'm telling people that is exactly the reason why we started this, because I was getting so frustrated at the glamorization of influencers and the fact that nobody was focusing on, okay, how do these creators actually build a business? Because all these creators go out there with these ideas that they're going to make it rich right away, but they don't understand that they actually have to start a business while they do this. So
yeah.
Anyways,
exactly.
Kudos to Emmy, who wrote this. Emmy Leiterman at AdWeek. So thank you, AdWeek. I would like to see more of these articles, please.
Yeah, if we can only get them to start talking about content marketing.
Oh, but you'll never see content. You will never see content marketing in this. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
What do you got?
Oh, I got a commentary really more than anything else. It's going to leave you with, it left me anyway, with more questions than answers here. This is totally going under the radar. I guess with everything else going on in the world, you can see why. But this comes courtesy of TechCrunch, and that the article is that basically the U.S. Ninth Circuit of Appeals Court has basically approved web scraping as a legal process. For those of you who don't know, so web scraping is ostensibly where you automate the process of pulling content or elements of content from public-facing websites and then use it for, your purposes. A great example of this might be the Wayback Machine. So if you've ever gotten, value from the Wayback Machine, going back in time and seeing what a website looked like, 5, 6, 10 years ago, that's web scraping at its prominence. So the article basically opens up and says, good news for archivists, academics, researchers, journalists who frequently use web scraping to go find out, and pull information from public-facing websites to use for their stories, for their research, and other types of things. The U.S. Ninth Appeals Circuit has said basically it's legal, and this all stems from a case that came from, it was basically submitted to the U.S. Supreme Court last year, but then sent back to the Ninth Circuit for reconsideration, and it was brought by LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, it had a case that it was basically against a company called HIQ, which was, they said, the company was illegally pulling data from public-facing profiles on LinkedIn to do things like look at job retention, statistics and those kinds of things. And fascinating because there's definitely two sides to this, right? There's absolutely two sides to this coin, which is it okay to go scrape content from a public-facing website to use for your own business purposes? And by the way, there are plenty of software solutions out there that will enable you to do just that, which is ostensibly just automating what you could do as a human. It's just making it faster and easier for you to go pull and copy and paste all of this, data that you may want to get from a big website. But then you go, okay, is that okay for a company like Clearview, which actually downloaded millions of profile pictures off of Facebook to do things like teach its artificial intelligence thing how to do face recognition? It starts to get a little weird, right? Yeah. And so the interesting thing here is, to me, what I find interesting is the difference between crawling and indexing and scraping gets to be a bit of semantics. In other words, when you start thinking about this as a content creator, we often talk about how Google and other sites will often scrape content or crawl it to make it a little more business friendly, and then use that content to display the news article you wrote in their own interface. Is that okay? Maybe not, because that's copyright infringement. Maybe it is. We don't know. I just think there's a lot of questions here on both sides that on one side of the coin, I go, yeah, I really want to be able to do this, because it would make silly, if it was illegal to actually use website content that you got on a public-facing website for your research paper. That's basically what you're doing. You're only scraping a very small snippet of it, versus snipping and scraping a whole website to pull into an application that allows you to do other things with it. I don't know. I really don't. It's a huge question for me, and I definitely want to follow it and get a little deeper into it. But it's I think I agree with the court that says you have to not bar it from anybody. LinkedIn, by the way, is appealing again and saying that they're really disappointed in the ruling because their terms of service for using the website says you can't do that. And so I think to myself, well, okay, that's the right answer is that you employ technology on your website to make it harder for the bots, for automated programs to do that kind of thing, or you structure your content in a way that makes it very difficult for bots to be able to do that and not humans. But then you go, okay, well, maybe that has implications for search engine optimization. Anyway, there's a whole litany of issues here, but I just think it's really interesting and a really interesting issue to think about when when we're thinking about creating content and the way it's getting used by others in our sphere.
It's getting so complex. It's hard to keep up. Just reading this, you're like, where is this going to go? We don't know. And I feel, boy, if you're on it, and if you're on any site today, anything you put onto any social media site is fair game. Is already been taken by people. Yeah. So a lot of people are like, oh, my data. You put anything, you just know this. You put anything out there. It's open.
And from a purely technology, because it used to be back in the day. I mean, when I say back in the day, I mean, 15 years ago, let's call it, that it was much, much harder to do this because the web was much less structured than it is today because of commonalities and consolidation in the way that web content is managed and created. There are the number of WordPress sites, for example, and the number of Adobe sites, and the number so structured predictability for automating software to understand the structure of websites is becoming much more consolidated and easier. Let's put it that way. So it's becoming an easier thing to do to understand where the structure of things are and to pull and to do scraping in an automated fashion. So there's sort of a dueling sets of technologies here, which is highly structured, makes better search, makes it easier, makes better user experiences, but it also makes it easier for automated bots to then pull elements of your content to use for its own, good purposes, research, journalism, etc., or nefarious purposes, pulling every profile page off of your website to teach AI how to do facial recognition.
Yeah.
It's just a fascinating thing.
Well, thank you for keeping us up on this side of the content experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't for you. I hadn't been following it. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, and so that it's thanks to Annie Schiffman, who brought it to my attention via the hashtag. So,
hi Annie.
Yeah,
that's so nice. So what's what's going on? What do you do?
Well, I got work to do. I got work. I got this presentation now I have to develop for this silly little CEX show.
I'm so excited that you're presenting. Yeah. It was a tough call. I didn't know. You don't have a lot of experience presenting. So I'm like, I'm going to take a chance on this guy who's been in the industry for 30 years now and see if we can same thing. We're heads down. We're so excited. We've got well over 300 now coming to the event. Great sponsorship support. I'll be heading to Phoenix next week, almost a week from today as we record this, and getting ready for the big event. So hopefully, all I know is that it's going to be hot. Probably
it's going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to that resort. And
oh my god, it's so
getting some time in the pool.
Awesome. They have like 7 pools. It's like a lot of pools, and there's an adult only pool, so you don't have any pesky children around you. Not that kind of adult only pool. I don't know. Maybe where you are. I don't know how these things work.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode. Our new little segment here at the very end to thank all of our audience contributors. Thank you so much to all the audience contributors for this episode. That includes, of course, Annie Schiffman, who I just mentioned, at Annie Schiff, SCHIFF on Twitter. Go follow Annie there and get more of her good stuff. Heath Dingwell, of course, great friend and family of the show. Heath at Heath Dingwell on Twitter, and of course, friend and family of the show for a very long time, James Gardner at James Gardner on Twitter. Go follow all 3 of those because they are just wonderful, wonderful people and great contributors, and we thank them for their contribution to the show.
Yes, absolutely.
And in the meantime, until next week, you can always go check out the show notes or dive into any of the other 319 episodes of this wonderful show. Head on over to our website at thisoldmarketing.site. Remember, all of those audience contributions, we love them on Twitter. Hashtag us up at thisoldmarketing. And until we meet again next week, just remember, folks, it's your story to tell. Tell it well. We'll see you next week on This Old Marketing.